photos contain some scenes you may find upsetting.
We're 20 years into the peace process, and we get fobbed off. Brush them under the carpet, let the victims go away, both the injured, both the bereaved. They don't count. Turn the key in the lock of the past. Just say, we'll put it in its box, we'll bury it away in the corner. For some, that may be an answer, or that may be an option. I'll tell you now, it's certainly not my answer.
It's not all over, it's not done and dusted, and something else needs to happen. There needs to be an acknowledgement of the true damage of those troubles and the effect that they're still having here in Northern Ireland.
People sometimes just take life for granted, but life's not like that. You should never take nothing for granted, because tomorrow is promised to no one.
I was very quiet and shy in those days. I was living in Belfast in a little house on the Springfield Road, just, you know, partying, enjoying yourselves, the usual at that age. Gosh, you know, what kind of a girl I was. It seems like so long ago. I was only 17. I don't know if I'd even decided what kind of a girl I was yet.
I hadn't a care in the world, actually. I was working at scaffolding and going to the bar for a drink with my friends at night and whatnot, and I had built up a good rapport with friends, and I always loved to meet them on a Friday and Saturday night. And it was always a nice occasion to get home from your week's work at the weekend and get out among the boys and have a bit of crack.
I was a student at the University of Ulster at Coleraine. Most weekends I would come back home for the usual student food parcels and sort of the mum to do the washing and things like that. My father was a contracts manager for Henry Brothers. Henry Brothers were a company that carried out work on security force bases throughout Northern Ireland. My mum and dad had separated for quite a few years, but they still had a civil relationship and were frequently in contact with each other, and on regular occasions my father would come up to my mother's house and would have dinner.
I turned to my right and there was two gunmen standing there with balaclavas on. I'm a big Manchester City supporter, and Paddy was a big Man United supporter. Paddy was a doorman in the Liga where he in, and I befriended him through time. And he was a lovely gentleman. He was 72 years of age. It was April 23rd, 1977. That particular day, City beat Manchester United. So I says, right, that's it. I goes up the stairs, gets my bath as usual, comes out, gets the hair dry out, gets the brood on. Away I goes, heading to the Lego, all right, great, happy days. I always left my friends and I always stood with Paddy at the back, where Paddy stood at the door, you see. So I went to the bar and I got him a drink. And I says, Paddy, here's this football coming on. I says, we the team, see my team giving your team a queer hiding here, boy. All I remember was the theme tune, which was and that is as far as it got. There was this, like a presence, like a heaviness, come into the room, just filled the whole room, and everybody went quiet. And I turned to my right, and there was two gunmen standing there with balaclavas on. One had a machine gun, and the one closest to me was shouting out orders. What he had said was, "This is UVF here, and there's no way that the provincials are going to take this bar over." I looked to my right, and Paddy's standing here on my left, and all of a sudden, from nowhere, Paddy's hand come across my chest and lifted the man's mask. Well, without hesitation, he just put his hand inside his coat like that, and he come across my chest here, and he shot Paddy in the head. The other fella, he opened up with a machine gun, but everything seemed to go in slow motion. I got up, and I got down beside Paddy, and his brains was blew out, and his eyes was spinning, his head, and it was a really horrific sight. I got down beside him, but I was saturated in his blood because his blood was pumping up out of his body. I sort of walked off, but I was absolutely saturated in blood.
It would have been on the evening of Thursday, the 21st of October, 1993. My father came in and sat down, and we had dinner together as a family. I remember my father was sat down after the meal. I think it might have been a stew. He got up to go on his way, and as I remember, he walked out the door and went, "See you anon," which was what my father nearly always did. After leaving my mother's house, he stopped off for his regular box of cigars, his treat, and then drove homewards to his house in Cornview. He drove home, stepped out of his car, started to walk up the driveway, and was then ambushed by two individuals, and unfortunately was shot and killed. Shortly after 9 o'clock that evening, there was a knock at the door. I went and answered it. They just said, "We've got some bad news. There's been an incident and John has been killed." And then time just stopped.
On the Saturday before, we'd been out to a dance, a disco, and one of the guys had walked me home, and we were chatting, and he wanted to see me again. So I said, "Well, actually, I'm off on this date." So we decided we would go to the cinema to see Godfather Part 2. Whenever we came out of the cinema, I decided, let's walk up home back to the flat. So we started to walk up the Grosvenor Road, and as we came to what was at the time just a zebra crossing, I saw a car slow down and guys pointed guns out of it. And I thought I was imagining it. So I turned and looked at him and said, "I think they're going to shoot us." Fully expecting him to say, "Don't be daft, you're imagining you're still in The Godfather." I just heard an explosion, really. And he pushed me down on the ground and lay on top of me. And when the explosion stopped, I tried to move to get up, and he said, "Lie down and pretend you're dead." And then I realised they were still shooting. Whenever it all was over, I tried to get up and I couldn't get up. And I was just lying there, and I could just see my kind of feet looked as if they were getting bigger and bigger. I wasn't in no pain at all. I couldn't feel, I mean, I was fine, I thought, but I couldn't get up. But a foot patrol did pass me while I was lying on the ground, and one of them looked down at me and said, "Oh great, another Fenian gone." And I was like, what kind of a thing is that to say? Then the ambulance arrived. They lifted me, and then I knew I was damaged, because then the pain was terrible, terrible.
Counselling, to the best of my memory, was never offered, so we were left to deal with it on our own. The next 24, 48 hours dealt with it, certainly not to be recommended, was I started probably with my friends drinking very heavily. And probably still drink a lot more than I should today. But for me, that was my get out, that was my escape. That was the way of burying the pain and the hurt to an extent.
When I was in hospital, it was whenever my mother came in to see me that I knew something serious was wrong, because her face, oh my goodness, I'll never forget it. And I thought, oh dear, this is bad, this is bad. Before I went to theatre, I was already harassing them, and I kept saying, I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my legs, what's wrong? And they were trying to avoid my questions and trying not to ask me, but I just persisted and persisted. And eventually they told me that evening before theatre that I would never work again. I had to have what was called a laparotomy, which was a surgery. They just opened up my front to find out what was going on. Because the bullets had hit me in the spine, ricocheted off, and hit me in my kidney, and then lodged in my left hip. They opened me up, sorted all that out, did a wee slit in my hip, took out the bullet. Thankfully it didn't exit, otherwise I would have had no hip. The police came to question me about what had happened. They took a brief description of me walking up the Grosvenor Road, getting shot, and off they went, and I never heard from them again. The Stoke Mandeville at the time was a recognised centre of excellence for spinal cord injury rehabilitation. So when a bed became available, then they transferred me to Stoke Mandeville. Then it really hit me, oh my God, because I could see other people in wheelchairs, I could see all this, and I thought, oh my goodness. I was always coming back to work. I was very, very lucky that I could do a job afterward that I did before. My mum phoned my boss and said, Mary's coming home, she'll be in work on Monday. And I was like, for flip's sake, could I not have a week off or something, or get acclimatized? No. You know, there was no time to sit down and think, oh, what's happened? You just had to, well, that was just the way I did it. Okay, what do we do now? What happens next? Let's do this. And that's the way it went. So I went back to work on the Monday morning.
I remember walking home, the street lights were just, as I walked towards them and they were going over my head, I was going, did this happen to me? I said, am I dreaming here? What's happening to me? I don't know. So I get home, my mother says, oh my God, Tommy, have you been shot? I says, I don't think so, Mum, I don't know. I walked up the stairs and I got into bed with my clothes not on. And that was the best night's sleep I've had in 40 years. Next morning, completely different Tommy. The old Tommy had gone. Because as soon as I opened my eyes, I knew there was something missing inside me or something had happened, but I didn't know what it was because my brain wouldn't let me put things together. I couldn't sleep at night because I obviously seen his face too. So my first reaction was, oh my God, they're going to come back and kill me. And I said, if they come in through that door, they'll kill my mother and father. The brain just goes all over the place. Because you just go like, you sort of malfunction. Your head just flies everywhere. And then I seen a doctor. My mum said to the doctor, he's been caught up in the shooting and whatnot. And the doctor says, what age are you? And I says, I'm 21. And he goes, oh, you'll be fine. I goes, what? He says, you'll be fine. So my mum says, do you hear that, Tommy? Now you're going to be all okay. He says, because the doctor says you're going to be fine. And out it goes, and that was it. No medication, no after help, no nothing. I couldn't even go to Paddy's funeral. I couldn't go to his wake. I distanced myself for it. I was frightened. I couldn't sleep. At least we noise, I was waking up and, oh, here they're coming to get me now, and didn't interact with anyone and sort of kept myself to myself and didn't trust anyone. The whole happy-go-lucky Tommy had gone. Now, to say forget about it and be perfectly honest with you, I did. Because the only way I could survive was to forget.
Even to this day, people treat you differently, which is very frustrating. Getting up and getting out and getting ready in the morning is not easy. It's never easy. It takes extra time. It takes so much. But you either decide, focus on that, or focus on what you want to do. And if I was just to sit down and focus on how difficult life is, jeepers, you never get anything done. I just want to live my life as best I can. And I have goals and things I want to do. And so I try not to think about the things that are difficult or impossible, just try to live. Whenever I got shot, they thought maybe I would live, 10, 12, 15 years. And they told me quite bluntly in hospital, you might survive to 32. And I thought at 18, well, okay, that doesn't sound too bad. When you're young, you don't think. But that's only half the story. As life goes on, and as you're using a wheelchair, you're using your upper body in a way that was never intended. So over the years, I've had numerous surgeries on my wrists, elbows, shoulders, you name it, and other surgeries, urethral issues and things like that. Numerous burns on my legs and feet. You wouldn't believe it. Hey, everybody. Let me double check. Who are you all? Biomedical science. But it's the ongoing damage that's so difficult. So you live in constant pain. That sounds so cliche, but you do. How many of you have read it? They tell you that it will go away, but that's a lie. But I understand that, because if they'd have told me that it wasn't going to go away, I don't know that if I could have coped. What happens is you get used to it and you deal with it, and it's there in the background all the time.
It ebbs, possibly. That's the best I can say. But it's always there. There's always a reminder. There's always a memory. In the immediate short term, it's a blur. The longer term, both myself and my mother have had massive health implications and probably mental health implications. This is my mother's house, where my father had his last meal that evening. My mother, unfortunately, no longer lives here. She's currently in a nursing home due to serious ongoing health issues, both physical and mental health, since my father's killing. Personally, myself, I've suffered 3 heart attacks, and again, a lot to do with the stress of my father's killer and sort of what I've gone through following his actions. And it's still there every day. It never goes away. One man was arrested and convicted for my father's killing. He was sentenced to life, but because of the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, I think he served with a remand maybe 3.5 years. He's currently actually serving a sentence in Mountjoy Prison for attempted murder. I am still personally fighting to have him now rearrested for my father's killing, because under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, as we were told, if you commit another criminal act, you return to jail to serve your original sentence. One Saturday afternoon, I was driving into town with my partner, and when I came round off the M2 onto the West Link, I saw a man step off a lorry, and to this day I'm convinced it was my father's killer. I panicked, and I then drove like a maniac, hoping that when I came round the corner, the man that had murdered my father would still be there, because he was going to go over my bonnet. I was convinced of that. Unfortunately, by the time I made my way round, he had gone. It shook me massively. I actually drove into Belfast, parked the car, went to a bar, bought a pint of beer and burst into tears. It had affected me that deeply. You put on a facade, people just see you functioning as a normal, for want of a better word, human being. That's what you have to do, because the choice is I continue and I live as best a life I can, or I let it overwhelm me and bury me. And if I do that, my father's killers have won again, and I'm not going to let that happen.
I was married roughly about 6 years, sitting watching a TV programme. It was called The Hungerford Massacre, and there was one glimpse of him shooting this man in the head, and I jumped up and I tried to run out the door and I couldn't get out the door. And I was pulling to the door handle, and my wife was shouting, "Tommy, what's wrong?" I said, "I have to get out of here. I have to go." I said, "I have to run here." And she says, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I says, "They're going to come and get me." I says, "Honestly, they're going to kill me." Well, I did not know at that particular time that was my trauma coming to the fore. And I went into a bad depression. There's times I feel ashamed to say this here, but it was a part of my life, so it has to be said. But I did contemplate dying and taking my own life to get out of the situation where I wanted to get out of the situation where my wife and my children and stuff didn't have to. They didn't have to suffer because I wasn't in the right place. They needed a father. My wife needed a husband. I felt that I wasn't that person. Where I live, there's a railway line. And I had it all planned. I thought about it, I dreamt about it, I felt it. What I had planned to do was walk out in front of the train. Because I knew once I took that step that I wasn't coming back. That's when I first told my wife that I was thinking about suicide, because she had no idea. She says, "You cannot do that because you have too much to live for. There's too many people on this earth want you here." And I couldn't believe it that when she said to me that how much they love me. Because it's a word that wasn't really, men don't use words like love, you know, and big boys don't cry and stuff like this, you know. But lucky enough, I had insight of the wisdom or something to go and seek professional help. I got talking to a social worker who put me in contact with an organisation called WAVE. Now, WAVE has been a complete lifesaver for me. Afterwards, after the event, I felt a bit ashamed, because whenever I went and sought the counselling about it and stuff like that there, and thought about it, it was really such a selfish act on my behalf. So whenever I came out of that mode that I didn't want to kill myself, the enthusiasm come back, the energy come back, the will to live come back, everything that I wanted and yearned for all these years had come back to me again.
I don't know if obsessed is the right word. Driven, certainly. Yes, I will pursue every avenue possible, because I believe what I'm asking for is right. It's quite easy for the media and the general public to say, let's move on, let's continue. But unless you've been in this situation yourself, it's one of the hardest things in the world to go through.
I do think that unless you know somebody who's been injured or who's been bereaved, I don't think you really do know the toll it has on those people or on those families. The worry that I have too is, I worry about my daughter because she's affected by it. She still worries about things and is very upset by things. And that worries me because that's living on. That memory is living on.
Please don't forget us. We're human after all. We're human beings. I want people to remember me as me, not as a person who's come through a situation through no fault of my own, but a person who has survived it. So I don't feel as if I'm a victim of the troubles no more. I feel I'm a survivor of the troubles.
If you've been affected by any of the issues in tonight's programme, information and support is available online at bbc.co.uk/actionline.